Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Carasoft Technology would like to welcome you to our ServiceNow Federal Tech Talk, Evolving Talent Management to Build the Federal Workplace of Tomorrow. Joining us today from ServiceNow, we have Kevin Hall, Principal Product Success Manager, and Chris Traylor, Global Executive for Talent Solutions. And from NuAxis, we have Michael Culhane, ServiceNow Developer. Just to tell you a little bit about Carasoft, we are a trusted government IT solutions provider supporting public sector organizations across federal, state, and local government agencies, including education and healthcare markets. At this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to our speakers. Chris, the floor is all yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having us, Sarah. We're really excited to be here today to talk about ServiceNow's innovative investments in talent solutions. And we're really thankful to have our great partners at NuAxis here today to show us some real-life customer examples of what they've done for some of our federal customers. Before I dive into today, Kevin or Michael, any other intro points from your end?
No, Chris, I say, yeah, I say let's get right into the content. I think we got a lot of good stuff teed up that you and Michael are going to present. So let's cannonball in.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for the introduction, Sarah. I greatly appreciate it. A little bit about myself and my background, and been supporting talent solutions for about 14 years now. The majority of that, around 12 years, actually entirely dedicated to the U.S. federal space. From an ATS, talent acquisition lens as well. And so really excited to be here today, as I mentioned, and talk about some of our investments from a ServiceNow standpoint. To kick off today's conversation, I wanted to start a little bit with talking about some of the challenges that we see across just talent acquisition as a whole globally. One of the key things that we're seeing is this key imperative that's changing in terms of transparency in the hiring process and the critical role that it plays in reducing federal time to hire, specifically for today's conversation, and also doing things like increasing agency employer brand and delivering and enabling, I should say, the delivery of mission critical outcomes by ensuring you have a well-qualified, well-skilled, and ready workforce to support U.S. citizens for whatever your agency mission might be. And some of the key challenges and metrics around those challenges that we're seeing is that over half of the candidate or applicant population is abandoning the recruitment process simply due to poor communication and recruiter and, frankly, employer engagement with those candidates and applicants. And conversely, over 60%, so well over half of the candidates and applicants, are becoming disinterested in a job if they don't get a response within 2 weeks from the initial interview. I want to talk about that because I think holistically, we consider an email to the candidate saying we received your application as an adequate response, right, within that 2-week window. I would say there are new and engaging ways in which we can interact with candidates, of course, while they're waiting for their application to be reviewed or their interview to be processed or even to receive their offer letter. And so I think it's important that we start looking at engagement from a new lens and something more than just the traditional ways of sending an email or maybe even just updating a status on a page. There are other ways in which we can engage the applicant or the candidate in the hiring process to ensure they're, number one, really excited about that ultimate offer letter that they receive. But number two, if they don't get an offer, that they're just as excited to come back and apply for 5 more jobs with your agency. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the broad problem across the talent lens globally currently, many of which do also impact the federal hiring processes that we live in every day. More narrowly and specifically, as some of you may be aware, OPM did release earlier this year its Workforce of the Future playbook. And this playbook, simply put, is aimed to help guide federal agencies on how they can transform and optimize key operational processes that span across not only the workforce in terms of once you're an employee and how to grow and develop and find new roles, but also the entirety of the talent supply chain. And the primary objective of this workforce and playbook is clear. Achieving federal workforce readiness, which of course federal hiring is a key ingredient to, but it really focusing on it in a way in which that ultimately delivers mission critical outcomes that are inevitable in terms of the future ahead. So simply put, future-proofing the federal workforce and federal hiring processes through scalable and repeatable plays is what this playbook seeks out to do. The ServiceNow platform and our innovative investments in not only talent acquisition, but talent management and development as a whole is well positioned to help federal agencies run these plays, things like strategic workforce planning, skills-based hiring, career growth, and ultimately development. And then, of course, data-driven workforce decisions that you can make to help drive these key activities, and leveraging key elements of things like AI, like technology, and in some cases, generative AI technology to improve the overall health of your federal agency. Now, I want to talk also about one that came out just last week that I'm sure is a hot topic for anyone in federal HR or federal recruitment or talent acquisition right now, which is the OMB Federal Hiring Experience memo that came out last week on August 14th. Last week. OMB released this executive memo basically employing federal agencies on prioritizing and improving the overall federal hiring experience, specifically for applicants, hiring managers, and of course, HR specialists that are involved in the overall hiring process at federal agencies. And at a more granular level, this memo delivers strategic guidance to agencies across three key areas. First and foremost, delivering a unified hiring experience for applicants, hiring managers, and HR specialists that enables engagement, collaboration, and simplification, most importantly, as key stakeholders traverse the federal hiring processes and federal hiring landscape. Second, through these experiences, where possible, agencies prioritize the streamlining and automation of hiring processes and deploy systems that deliver collaborative mechanisms to engage across every step of the hiring process. And lastly, and likely the most important for agencies, that agencies invest in technology that can act as a critical operational enabler to not only deliver these new hiring experiences and automated processes, but also offer the ability to collect and analyze intelligently data across the entire hiring process in a way that delivers insights to key stakeholders and impacts key federal metrics like things like time to hire to ensure the overall advancement and ultimately inevitable evolution of the federal hiring landscape. So today we're going to hear from Michael and NuAxis in terms of some of the things that we've done from a platform perspective to really solve for some of these challenges. But I want to talk about from a system standpoint. We've talked about some of the processes with the workforce of the future and the OMB memo that we're looking to correct within the federal landscape. But the problem still exists today for applicants, hiring managers, employees, HR specialists. There's this complete complex web of systems that we have to interact with. ServiceNow has found through many reports that there's sometimes upwards of 80 different systems that these different stakeholders have to interact with for the hiring, employment, and ultimately even development processes that you go throughout your typical career journey with any given employer. Now, of course, federal government agencies will differ in those numbers, but the fact remains the same: is it's a complex web of different systems spanning across USAStaffing or Monster Government Solutions, if you're using those from an ATS perspective. The job board you first interact with, which is USA Jobs in most cases, or LinkedIn, virtual interviews through tools like HireVue, and then, of course, all of our traditional systems in federal government, like our core HR PeopleSoft or SuccessFactors or maybe Workday, core HR systems that you're interacting with. And then, of course, right, the spreadsheets, the emails, and all of these different systems. And the impact that delivers to all of these stakeholders is high attrition and turnover throughout the application process, and even in some cases throughout the employment process, if we're not offering that same experience once we've got that individual in the door and offered them routes to go and grow and develop and find opportunities to move around within the agency. It also produces a significant lack of visibility and bottlenecks across all key parts of the process, which means that hiring managers are unable to get somebody in the door to support the mission or fill the void when someone leaves the organization, or applicants are simply not waiting around, or applicants are simply in the dark and maybe are accepting another job that maybe didn't even want as much just because they weren't informed or didn't have an experience to collaboratively engage with those key stakeholders. And for hiring specialists or HR specialists and recruiters, it's as simple as being able to kind of corral all of these people together in one place: personnel security for the security designation of a position, the hiring manager to ensure that all the key factor level statements are maybe in place for our position before posting, and we also have approval from finance as well. All of this comes together in one across multiple systems today, and having it come together in one single system is really what we need to ensure that we're improving overall time to hire, increasing visibility, and ultimately getting more applicants in the door and starting with our agencies. So what does this look like from a ServiceNow standpoint? We bring everyone together within a single system where recruiters, hiring teams, leadership, candidates can go so we can bring on the best talent in a single system. So all of your key and critical underlying systems of record, your core HR systems, your applicant tracking systems, your job boards, those remain in place. We provide a single, consolidated, unified experience for end-to-end hiring. And not just end-to-end hiring, but end-to-end from hire to retire, or apply in this case, actually, to retire. So when the second your applicant or your candidate applies to a job, they're able to traverse one single consolidated experience that evolves with them as their journey with your organization, your agency evolves. And at a more granular level, this is what it looks like on the ServiceNow platform and some of the key elements that we deliver. For the hiring managers, the applicants, and the HR specialists, most notably, we provide proactive activities and actions that are driven by multiple experiences through things like Leader Hub for the HR executive, or the agency leadership executive, I should say. Manager Hub for the day-to-day leader within the organization. A whole new portal-based experience for applicants and candidates to interact with your agency far earlier in the process, and a dedicated recruiter workspace that provides seamless tools for the recruiter to orchestrate hiring processes across the agency. And the outcome of this is a quickly future-proofed workforce that is able to deliver mission-centric outcomes with leadership that's able to provide data-driven workforce insights that help us not only improve and optimize these processes over time, but ensure that we're reducing bottlenecks along the way and getting folks in the door a lot more quickly and efficiently. And so today, I just want to talk about some of the key experiences that we really solve for here at ServiceNow. Of course, the employee we talk about all the time. With some of the new journeys that we're delivering on platform and through great partners like NuAxis, we're now going to be supporting the hiring manager journey in terms of a hiring manager being able to do things like open a job requisition from one single system. So the second an employee decides to leave, we can actually now directly orchestrate the backfill of that position that much more quickly through a single consolidated system that interacts with all the systems that are involved with offboarding someone from your organization and backfilling that role. We're also going to talk about the hiring managers, or the hiring specialists, excuse me, the recruiter in common terms, but HR specialists in federal lingo, on how they can better collaborate with the organization from a requisition and hiring management perspective across all key stakeholders. Like I said earlier, finance, personnel security, the hiring manager, the applicant, or maybe even the employee if it's an internal hire as well. And then last and certainly not least, we are also solving for the applicant experience with our new solutions and providing that single consolidated experience from the day that applicant applies to the day that they retire. So thank you guys so much for the quick intro. I really appreciate the opportunity today. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Chris. I'll share my screen here. I think you might have to, yep. Okay. So as Chris and Sarah both mentioned, my name is Michael Culhane. I'm a certified implementation specialist on the ServiceNow HRSD module, as well as a certified technical architect for the ServiceNow platform. I work with the NuAxis Innovations. We are a federal IT company that specializes in the citizen experience as well as the employee experience, and in this case, the applicant experience, basically putting people at the center of all of the technology and processes that we seek to improve. So today we're going to be talking about ServiceNow HRSD and USAStaffing. We recently finished an implementation of ServiceNow HRSD, or a phase 1 implementation, I should say, because there's more improvements to come with a federal agency. And as part of that implementation, we did a USAStaffing integration. So I'll talk about USAStaffing integration in general with HRSD, and I'll also have some tidbits and some lessons learned that we had along the way with this particular federal agency. I'll keep using the term federal agency to describe them. They've asked to sort of remain anonymous, so I won't divulge their name, but federal agency will be their name for the next 15 minutes. Before I dive into the details, I'll just mention that there are lots of good information. There's lots of good information at developer.usastaffing.gov. You click on the link to interconnections. Don't let the developer name scare you. There are lots of videos geared towards just HR specialists and regular users who might want to know how these things work. So lots of good information to be found there at the USAstaffing.gov website. So let's fly up to 30,000 feet and take a look at the hiring process in general terms here. So this is from an OPM document, end-to-end hiring initiatives, and it shows the hiring piece of the 80-day hiring model. And so for simplicity's sake, I'll break this down into 3 phases. So our first phase is the request phase. This is everything from the hiring manager saying, putting in their request to fill, all the way through confirming the job analysis and figuring out the assessment strategies. Then we move to the second phase, which is recruitment. This is actually building the announcement in USA Staffing, all the way through the announcement opening, the announcement closing, and then making the selection. And then finally, the onboarding phase, which starts with the tentative job offer and goes all the way through to entry on duty. So now that we have our 3 phases laid out here, let's take a look at how USA Staffing and other systems, the ServiceNow, fit into this, this workflow. So before ServiceNow comes along and before it came along to this federal agency, the systems looked kind of like this. So the request would start in email. There'd be some PDFs mixed in there, some Post-it notes, smoke signals, conversations in the hallway, all the different ways that we acquire, that we build a request. And then once the request was settled and the job analysis was confirmed, we moved to the recruitment phase with USA Staffing, where we would build the announcement and go through the whole announcement process, and then go through the onboarding process. And this was all also done in USA Staffing. And then there are some other systems that get involved once the onboarding is ready. And then, of course, we have a layer of a tracker spreadsheet to keep track of it all. So the HR specialists were basically taking things out of email and PDFs and moving it into the tracker spreadsheet, taking it out of email, PDFs, moving it into USA Staffing, taking it out of USA Staffing, moving it back to the tracker spreadsheet. And everyone was trying to keep track of what's going on, asking questions, where is my hiring action? And we'd have to go digging through spreadsheets to figure that out. So then the agency went with ServiceNow. So ServiceNow replaces the email, PDF, Excel dance over in the request, replaces the tracker spreadsheets. And as Chris was talking about earlier, basically everything is kept track of, and in all this, the engagement happens with one system. So the hiring manager comes back to ServiceNow. This is where they put their request in, and this is where they follow their request through its entire life cycle, right up to where the employee gets hired. And then even after that, even after the employee starts, we're still in ServiceNow for getting all that onboarding going and all the requests that need to happen once the employee is already going. So ServiceNow has really becomes the central hub for all of the experience, all of the hiring manager experience, as well as the new hire experience. Okay, so now let's talk about the integration options between ServiceNow HRSD and USA Staffing. So when we first got going with ServiceNow, they weren't sure, this agency wasn't sure that we'd have the paperwork done in time for the USA Staffing integration. So our initial plan was to make sure that we could keep track of things manually between USA Staffing and HRSD. And this may be what, if you're already using ServiceNow and USA Staffing, you may be doing this, where you're kind of taking information down from USA Staffing and putting it into ServiceNow manually, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's certainly better than using a spreadsheet. But the HR specialists were not thrilled about having to continue their manual work. So we did end up getting the agreement for the USA Staffing integration. We got all the paperwork done, and we were able to do that. So let's take a look at the 3 options we have, and I'll talk about the option that we went with, but we'll look at general terms of the 3 options there are. So the first one is what they call the Request Processing Interconnection, RPI. And with RPI, what RPI allows you to do is to take data from HRSD and to push it up into USAStaffing. So for example, with the request, when the hiring manager puts in their request to fill, we know who the hiring manager is, we know the position title, we know the series that we're trying to fill, the grade, etc. All that gets entered into ServiceNow, so that we can then take that data from ServiceNow and push it up into USAStaffing in order to build the request, the vacancy, and I think the announcement you can build with that. So you're taking that data, and instead of doing it manually, copying and pasting from ServiceNow up to USAStaffing, you do that automatically by pushing it up there. Now, once those records have been built in USAStaffing using that data from ServiceNow, from HRSD, we can then receive real-time updates on the tasks associated with those records back down into HRSD. So this allows you to then report back to the hiring manager, or to give visibility to the hiring manager as to what's going on in USAStaffing. For example, we might have a task for the certificates have been sent. So then that task then gets sent down to ServiceNow, who can then report back to the hiring manager saying, hey, the certificates have been issued. So the hiring manager can keep track of what's going on in USAStaffing without having to go to USAStaffing or ask a HR specialist. It's all on their screen. So the RPI, although it's the first one I have here chronologically in the order of the workflow, it's also probably the most complex of the three options, of the three integration options to integrate. And the federal agency I'm working with actually hasn't integrated RPI yet because it is so complex, and we were still getting together things are in HRSD over here in the request phase, but this is on the roadmap for the future. Okay, the second integration possibility is the data API, and this is probably the simplest to get going, and this is the one that the federal agency I'm working with decided to go with. So with the data API, we are able to pull down information from USAStaffing and bring it down into HRSD. So you can basically get a copy of most of the data in USAStaffing down into HRSD. So you make these requests, and then you just pull that data down into HRSD. And then once it's in HRSD, you can do something similar as you would do with the RPI, where you're reporting back to the hiring manager about where their request is and what the tasks are that have been completed. And I have a screenshot I'll show on the next slide after this of what that looks like for the hiring manager. But basically, yeah, once you pull that data down, then you can do all kinds of stuff with it. You can use it for reporting back to the hiring manager. You can also use it for reporting at the HR level. So all of the data in USAStaffing is available in their Cognos solution, where you can do reporting. However, the data that's not available in USAStaffing is the things that happened before we got to USAStaffing. So everything that happened at the request phase is not available in USAStaffing because we don't send that information up. In the same way, the things that happen in the onboarding phase, or even after EOD, is not included in USAStaffing. So by pulling that data down into HRSD, you can mash that up with the data we have in HRSD and USAStaffing to get kind of a full picture of what's going on. And with the data API, you can download pretty much everything. So tasks, requests, vacancies, announcements, etc. One thing to note, and I'll talk about this a little bit in the lessons learned, is that the data is delayed. So unlike the RPI, which happens as soon as it happens in USAStaffing, with the data API, the data can be up to 24 hours and sometimes even a little bit longer to be available for download into HRSD. So it happens in USAStaffing, and then you have to wait in order to be able to download it into HRSD. So that's one of the downsides of using the data API. And then the final integration option is the NHI, the new hire interconnection, which, as the name implies, is for new hires. And the way this one works is you tell USAStaffing in a workflow, you make the NHI task a step in your workflow. So you say, okay, well, after we send the, let's say, after we send the tentative offer, I want you to push that data down to HRSD. I want you to push the first name, last name, the address of the new hire down into HRSD. So then that happens in real time. When the workflow gets to that step, it pushes your data down into HRSD. And then in HRSD, you can do all kinds of things with it. You can trigger your onboarding process. You can move that data down to other systems, et cetera. So you can also do this with the data API. I'm showing this orange arrow here. The difference, again, is that the NHI is real time, so it happens exactly when you want it to happen, whereas the data API is delayed. So it may be 24 hours before you get that data down. But regardless of which one you use, what's really neat about this is that when you think about it, the candidate enters their first name and last name, say, into USA Jobs, like when they sign up for USA Jobs. And that data follows them all the way through the USA staffing recruitment process, and then down into HRSD, and then it can even flow down into the other systems such that it never gets typed again, which is pretty awesome when you think about it. We're talking months and months of data of just following them all the way through the process without having to manually type the data again. This is a huge plus. The HR specialists love that. Okay, so these are our three main options for integrations. Let's just briefly look at what are some of the advantages, review some of the advantages of using these one or all of these integration options. So the first one, we spoke about this a lot, is increased visibility. The hiring manager puts in their request into the Employee Center, into HRSD, and they can keep going back there to figure out what's going on. Right? They don't have to ask the HR specialist. They don't have to go digging through tracker spreadsheets. You get a lot of transparency, Chris was talking about as a keyword, and an increased visibility for the hiring manager. In terms of the HR supervisory staff and HR staff, we get full picture reporting. We know everything that happened with this request from the time it was initially entered all the way through to EOD and even beyond EOD. So we can really report back on all those metrics and look for where the bottlenecks may be so that we can try to improve the process. And then finally, automation. And I talked about the candidate typing in their name one time and then it never having to be typed again. Similarly, over here, we see that that information gets entered into HRSD and that can be pushed up into USA Staffing. And then down here in the onboarding process, the new hire information coming in, and then we're able to trigger other processes just based on that new hire information coming in. So lots of space for automation. So as I mentioned before, here's a screenshot, and this is from, so this is just some sort of dummy data, but this is a screenshot from what the hiring manager would see in Employee Center. So this is where they go in to put their request, and then they end up in a ticket status page, and the other tabs, this is where they do their tasks, and the activity is where they can participate in the chat. So we have this this new tab called Timeline we developed. And what this is doing is it's taking data from USA Staffing and kind of summarizing it into this workflow. So this shows the hiring manager, hey, this is here's all the steps that we have to do. Here's the date that the request entered this step, and here's how long it took for that step to be completed. So this is a really great tool. Hiring managers love this. They can log in and see and get their question answered, which is their question is always, where is my action and why is it taking so long? This gives them an idea of where things are, why they're taking so long. And for HR, we're able to do reporting on all of these different metrics. So we can know, how on average, how long has it taken to create the job analysis or to build the announcement, et cetera. It really gives us a good idea of where those bottlenecks may be. Okay, I'll end with some lessons learned in our implementation with this federal agency. The first lesson learned is that getting set up takes a long time. OPM or USA Staffing has great documentation on what needs to happen and even expected timelines for how long they'll take. Those timelines are definitely accurate, and maybe you even have to tack on a few. a few more days for some of these things. It does take a long time just to get paperwork set up and that kind of thing. The technical aspect is actually pretty straightforward. It's the memorandums of understanding and all those kinds of things that take a while to get set up. A second lesson learned is the volume of data in staging versus production. So as you're getting set up in USA Staffing, there's a certain point that they allow you to get into the staging environment so you can start getting your technical piece set up. So initially, we set everything up in the staging environment. And then once all the paperwork got signed and we finally got finished with that, we got access to production. And I discovered that the volume of data is much larger in production than it is in staging. So we had to do some sort of reworking of things just to account for the larger volume of data. But that's just something to keep in mind as you're building, because you'll get access to staging first. So you want to try and think about that there is going to be a torrent of data coming down once you get access to production. And then the final thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is that the data API is delayed. So the data API is the easiest, as I mentioned, of the 3 API options to get set up. But the data coming down is delayed. So for most of the process, that's fine. If the hiring manager, if it takes a day for the hiring manager to see an update from USA Staffing, it's usually not a big deal. But when it comes time to the new hire, to the onboarding piece, that's where we start to, that's where the time starts to become a little more essential. So we're actually looking into, at this federal agency, we're looking into integrating the new hire interconnection instead of using the data API just for the new hire piece, because we get the real-time updates there. So that's been a very brief overview of our 3 integration options, the wonders of using it, and some of the lessons learned in using it. This same presentation that I just gave is available in a video at nuaxis.com/SN. You scroll down to the bottom of the page and you'll see the same presentation with the same deck there, with the same explanation. So I thank everybody for their time, and I guess we'll open it up to questions, or I'll pass it back to you, Chris.
Hey, Michael, this is Kevin. I just want to kind of reiterate one point that you made, which I think is important for everybody to understand, is in the overall integration process with USA Staffing, and frankly, this is true with any external business system in ServiceNow, is never underestimate the amount of time to do the people and process work. In other words, like you said, the memorandums of understanding, the interconnected system agreements, and things like that, the paperwork that needs to be done before you can connect the new systems. I think most of the time, it's been our experience, that's usually what takes the longest in integrating 2 systems together. And I think other than that, if anybody on the audience has any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A panel. We'll leave it open for a couple of minutes. Michael, Chris, thank you very much. That was really fantastic stuff. And Michael, thank you for sharing your experience at that federal agency. I know there's something that a lot of ServiceNow customers and partners are interested in hearing more about. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, so Michael, the question from Kristen is terrific details on the integration. It takes time, and as a staffing specialist, she's happy to see it. She did want to know, how long do you think the process takes at an agency? So you mentioned that OPM has some standard SLAs on timelines for the MOUs and things like that. Do you happen to have those off the top of your head?
I don't. There is a document, if you Google it, you probably Google USA Staffing. It's kind of hidden, so I don't know if it's available on a link anywhere, but if you Google USA Staffing interconnections or something like that, you should be able to come up with a PDF, and they have a nice timeline. I don't remember what it is offhand, but I would say at least 4 to 5 months from start to finish.
Well, thank you again to our participants as well as our speakers for being with us today. We hope the information you received during this webinar has been helpful. If you have any further questions or would like to request more information, please feel free to reach out. Thank you again and have a great day.